Number 1. In this question, you will be asked to talk about a familiar topic. After you hear the question, you will have 15 seconds to prepare your response and 45 seconds to speak. Talk about a book you have read that was important to you for some reason. Explain why the book was important to you. Give specific details and examples to explain your answer.
Begin to prepare your response after the beep. Begin speaking after the beep.
I am a great reader, and from all the books that I have read, I would particularly choose The Man in the Sea. This book has created an important impact in my life because of the following reasons. In the first place, this is a book about struggle. In it, a man reaches an island after his boat capsizes in the sea, and he has to learn how to live in the island. So he has to learn the basic survival skills such as fishing, cooking, looking for shelter. And this particular part of the book told me that it doesn't matter what happens in life. I have to try to find solutions regardless of the difficulty of the problem. I have to continue going on, and by reading this book, I learned a lot of things.
Number 2. In this question, you will be asked to give your opinion about a familiar topic. After you hear the question, you will have 15 seconds to prepare your response and 45 seconds to speak. Some people believe that television has had a positive influence on society. Others believe it has had a negative influence on society. Which do you agree with, and why? Use details and examples to explain your opinion.
Begin to prepare your response after the beep. Begin speaking after the beep.
Even though some people consider that television has had a negative influence in society, I would personally say that it has had a positive effect due to the fact that by watching TV, people can learn a lot of new things. For instance, sometimes I watch the History Channel and I discover things from the past, or I watch Discovery Channel and I can learn things. Or, for example, by watching the National Geographic Channel, I learn a lot of things about animals. So I understand those who say that there are a lot of bad programs like reality shows and these programs are bad. I totally understand that because they don't give a good influence in people, but I would say television has had a positive impact.
Number 3. In this question, you will read a short passage about a campus situation and then listen to a talk on the same topic. You will then answer a question using information from both the reading passage and the talk. After the question, you will have 30 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. Centerville College is planning to purchase a new sculpture for its campus. A student wrote a letter to the campus newspaper opposing this plan. You will have 45 seconds to read the letter. Begin reading now.
Let's see. Administration acquires sculpture. Oppose university poor financial condition. That is number 1. So poor financial condition from students. They're going to increase 15%. That means the person is opposing the acquisition of the sculpture. And a financial position, that is sculpture. So the place, the angles, it take up a green space. Okay, so there are two reasons.
Now listen to two students discussing the opinion expressed in the letter.
Did you see Paul's letter in the paper about the new sculpture?
Yeah, but it was totally unconvincing. His reasons for opposing the plan are just totally off. I'm glad we'll finally have some nice art on campus. I'd like to shake the donor's hand and say thank you.
What do you mean, the donor?
You didn't know? An anonymous donor is paying the bill for most of the sculpture.
Not the university?
No. His assumptions about who's paying for it are all wrong.
Still, I wonder if he has a point about the space it'll take up.
Well, you know why Paul is upset. He and his friends are always out there on the lawn right where their sculpture will be, kicking around the soccer ball. Now they'll just have to use another part of the campus to play.
Oh, so he just doesn't want to have to move.
Yeah, for him, it's sculpture versus convenience.
Explain why the woman disagrees with the reasons expressed in the letter.
Begin to prepare your response after the beep. Begin speaking after the beep.
The woman completely disagrees with the ideas expressed in the letter that Paul wrote about opposing the new sculpture acquisition by the university campus. She thinks his ideas are totally unconvincing because, in the first place, the woman mentions that the money to purchase the sculpture is to be paid by an anonymous donor, not by the university, and this idea contradicts the one expressed in the letter because in it, Paul says that the university is not in a financial position to purchase such expensive sculpture. Secondly, the woman mentions that the space where the sculpture will be is to be placed by the people, and they are going to play soccer ball there. By playing soccer ball there, Paul and his friends don't want the sculpture to be there. So that's why he is opposing the idea, but the woman actually thinks the university has to have some nice art.
Number 4. In this question, you will read a short passage on an academic subject and then listen to a talk on the same topic. You will then answer a question using information from both the reading passage and the talk. After the question, you will have 30 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. Now read the passage about groupthink. You will have 45 seconds to read the passage. Begin reading now. Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in a business management class.
So let me tell you about my own experience with this when I was working for a computer company a couple of years ago. So one day a coworker and I suggested we should give our computers a design makeover, make them look more up to date. Market research was showing that new customers said they would be more interested in buying our computers if they looked cooler. Our technology was advanced, but the outside design looked really old-fashioned. At first, more than half the group supported us. There were a few senior managers there, though, who didn't support the design change. One of the senior managers said, "Our focus has always been on technology. Changing the look is an unnecessary cost." Almost immediately, some of our supporters changed their minds. Even my coworker changed his mind. When I asked him why after the meeting, he told me he didn't want to make a bad impression on the senior managers. He thought that disagreeing with them might jeopardize his chances of getting a promotion by not looking like a team player. What about me? I hate to admit it, but after a few hours of discussion, I started wondering if it was worth everyone's time to argue about this. As more people sided with senior management, I started to feel like I was the only one holding up the vote. Everyone else seemed to think change wasn't necessary, so I voted against my own idea in the end. So we unanimously decided to stay with the current old-looking design. But this decision ended up costing us a lot of money. That same year, our competitor came out with a new design that attracted some of our customers and prevented us from profiting on potential new customers.
Explain groupthink and its effects using the example of the computer company.
Begin to prepare your response after the beep. Begin speaking after the beep.
The professor exemplifies the ideas expressed in the written passage about groupthink. He mentions his own example when he was working for a computer company. He and a coworker proposed a good idea, which consisted in giving the computers a better look, because some of the market research results said that it would be convenient. And even though the idea had initial support from more than half of the staff, the fact that some senior managers didn't support the idea, arguing that changing the look of the computers was an unnecessary cost, made everybody change their minds. They didn't change their minds because it was the best idea. In fact, they did this because they didn't want to disagree with the senior managers, which would jeopardize their promotions in the future. And this tells me and exemplifies the ideas of groupthink, in which people make bad decisions because of a group pressure, even though they wouldn't do it by themselves.
Number 5. In this question, you will listen to a conversation. You will then be asked to talk about the information in the conversation and to give your opinion about the ideas presented. After you hear the question, you will have 20 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. Now listen to a conversation between two students.
Hey, Mary, how's your volunteer work going? You still involved in that after-school program with the elementary school kids?
Yeah, but I've got a problem. I'm supposed to be driving a bunch of them to the zoo tomorrow.
Yeah?
And I was supposed to rent a van for the trip. But I waited too long to call the rental agency to reserve one. And now it turns out they don't have any vans available for tomorrow. I don't know what to do. These kids will be really disappointed if their trip gets canceled.
Well, doesn't one of your friends here on campus have a car? I mean, couldn't you borrow it for the day?
Yeah, probably. But I'd need to borrow 2 cars, or there wouldn't be enough space for all the kids. That's why I was going to rent the van. And then I'd need to find somebody else to drive, too. I can't drive 2 cars by myself.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I'm sure you can probably find a volunteer. Or if you wanted to save yourself the trouble of hunting down a second driver, well, what about public transportation? Check the bus schedule. I think there's a bus line that goes right past the zoo.
Yeah, that's a possibility. But I don't know. It might be a real challenge supervising the kids on the bus. Sometimes they're a handful when they get excited. It's an option, though.
The speakers discuss 2 possible solutions to the woman's problem. Briefly summarize the problem, then state which solution you recommend and explain why.
Begin to prepare your response after the beep. Begin speaking after the beep.
From the problem presented in which a student waited too long to rent a van for a school trip to the zoo, and the 2 solutions offered being the first one, to have a second car, to borrow a couple of cars and have somebody else to help her drive, or the second solution being to use the public transportation. In my opinion, the student should use the public transportation, because by doing it, this could be a nice opportunity for the kids to have a taste of the real world. In my opinion, students are going to be able to interact with other people. Students are going to be able to use a real public transportation, something they will be doing in the future a lot. And by doing it, again, they will have this great opportunity to do real world things, even though they're children. On the other hand, if the student has the 2 cars, she's going to have to ask somebody. If this person doesn't want it, it is going to be hard for them.
Number 6. In this question, you will listen to a short lecture. You will then be asked to summarize important information from the lecture. After you hear the question, you will have 20 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. Now listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class. The professor is discussing the mathematical capabilities of babies.
Scientists have learned some interesting things about the intellectual abilities of babies. They say there's evidence that babies as young as 5 months old can do basic arithmetic, that they can add. Scientists think babies know that 1 + 1 = 2 and not 1. The evidence is indirect because, obviously, you can't ask a 5-month-old baby to add up some numbers for you. So they devised an experiment where, in this experiment, a baby is shown a doll on a table. Okay, so the baby looks at the doll. Then the researcher lowers a screen in front of the doll. So now the doll's hidden behind the screen. But the baby's already seen the doll and so knows it's there. Well, then the researcher takes a second doll and very obviously places it behind the screen with the first one. Okay, so now you have 2 dolls behind the screen, right? Well, no, because what the researchers did was they secretly took away one of the dolls. And then when they raised the screen back up, the baby, well, it expects to see 2 dolls, right? But there's only 1 there. And guess what? The baby's surprised. It expects 2, but it only sees 1. How could the researchers tell that the baby's surprised? Well, they recorded the baby's eye movements on camera. And we know that when a baby is surprised by something, a loud noise or an unexpected flash of light maybe, it stares at where the noise or light is coming from. And that's what the babies in the experiment did. They stared, because a baby knows that if you add 1 doll and 1 doll, you should have 2 dolls. So when it sees one doll, then it stares because it's surprised.
Using the research described by the professor, explain what scientists have learned about the mathematical abilities of babies.
Begin to prepare your response after the beep. Begin speaking after the beep.
The professor discusses the intellectual abilities of babies according to some research. Babies as young as 5 months old can do basic mathematical operations. In the experiment, the professor describes a baby. In this baby is shown a doll on a table. Then the screen is lowered, hiding the doll. And then the child expects to see 2 dolls because another doll was added. But this time it was subtracted, it was taken away. And the child expresses surprise because the child stares at the doll. And by doing it, researchers understand by recording the eye movement that the child was surprised because he was expecting to see 2 dolls, but he only sees 1 doll. This experiment again proves that kids have intellectual abilities to add, and they can do it as beginning at 5 months of age.